the difference between a single family, even in a new area of the mountain, and an older property that's been renovated and you have a second unit in there is almost like $1,500. So a new detached house will rent out for like $3,000, and an older bungalow which has been renovated and now has 2 units will get $4,300 to $4,500. So in this video, we're going to cover the Hamilton Mountain area and what it has to offer, as it is a very popular area amongst investors, especially people coming from out of town, because it's one of the few areas where you get A-quality tenants and nicer properties. There's nicer neighborhoods, but you get that affordability where you can actually buy the property, rent it out, and still get all of your expenses covered. And a lot of times you can even cash flow on properties even at today's rates. Hamilton's very diverse. As you know, the city's huge. There's like 5 different areas which make up the overall cities. But then to the south, like the most southern point of the city is the Hamilton Mountain. Probably makes up a third of the city, if not half of it, if you combine all the areas. So it's pretty large, which is a good thing because you can find a lot of inventory there, especially in markets like right now where there isn't really a lot of inventory available for sale. So it's a solid area. You can still find properties, you know, in that 600 to 800K range, which is pretty affordable compared to most GTA areas where the average detached property is $1 million or a minimum of $1 million. Now, one thing to keep in mind is across the mountain, the rents are pretty much the same. Obviously, the prices vary between newer properties and older properties, but we always try to find the perfect mix. So we try to find something that's not in too rough of a shape, or if it is, it has to be a really good deal. At the end of the day, we just want to be able to put the right amount of units in there or the right people in there to get that rent that covers all the expenses and maybe even cash flows at today's rates. I'll kind of cover the different areas within the mountain because, as I said, it is a large area. So it's split into different sections that I want to kind of like highlight. It's easier to absorb it that way. So if you look at the actual area, it's kind of built from the north going south. You'll be seeing a lot of the videos I'm putting up. Sometimes some of the videos are kind of like just driving through the neighborhoods and you'll see what things look like, and then some of them are the actual streets, so you'll notice the difference. If you go north, a lot of times you're gonna find like smaller lots because it is older neighborhoods. Like sometimes there are smaller lots there, but it is a mix, so it's not all like that. Like you'll still find the typical bungalow, which the Hamilton Mountain is known for, where you have the side entrance going to the basement and then the front entrance going to the main floor. So you might have properties that were built in like the 40s, 50s. And sometimes the tricky part is those older properties don't have as much ceiling height in the basement. So you can't put legal units in there because they don't meet the building code requirements, because you need about 6'7" in Hamilton. A lot of times that might not work, but then the good thing is like some of those properties do have that potential. And sometimes they even have detached garages in these older areas because that's common. And nowadays you can convert a lot of those detached garages into second or third units. So that gives you the potential to generate like almost $6,000 from a property if you can get 3 units on there. So that's the interesting part about the north part of the mountain. Even though it is older, there's a lot of potential there, and the rents are generally the same as some of their newer areas as well. Now, if you go east, it's kind of, I guess, somewhat newer than the north area, but it is a lot more quiet. I think it's a little undervalued because a lot of people don't really give it that classification of a nicer area, but it is like there's a lot of pride of ownership. There's bigger lots, and generally you can find a lot of bungalows that can be converted to second units. And I actually have a property there as well. So I think like generally whenever we get people that come and stay, because we rent it out on Airbnb, everyone has good things to say about the neighborhood. Especially people that come from out of town, they're surprised a lot of times because there's a lot of trails, there's parks. It's in close proximity to Albion Falls, if you're familiar with the area. I wouldn't say it's more pricey than most areas. It's like in between what you would pay for something in a North Mountain and on something on the West Mountain. So it might be like 20 to 50K more than something you'll pay in the North Mountain. Now, going to the West Mountain, it's like a prestigious area. It's known to be one of the nicest parts of Hamilton, and there's a reason for that. It's actually located near St. Joseph's Hospital. So as soon as you go a little bit west, Mohawk College, St. Joseph's Hospital, all those places are there. So a lot of the houses like to the west of that, they're kind of like on these bigger lots. Sometimes they're a little more customized, even the older ones. And it's just, you can just feel the difference when you go there between other parts of Hamilton, especially like the lower city. Like it's quiet, there's a lot of greenery, and it's also near the other end of the mountain. So there's nice scenery, there's a lot of parks, all that stuff, but it's a little quieter. Like you can tell, you know, a lot of the people living there too, often they've been there for like 30, 40, 50 plus years. A lot of people retire there. There's a lot of custom homes. So I would say like rents wise, like I said, everything is pretty much the same, but price wise, the West Mountain might be like one of the most expensive areas to buy a property on the mountain, but you often still get like really big, nice properties on big lots. And if you're looking to move to the city, it might be one of the better areas, or one of the top choices, I would say, for you to go to. So going south, the South Mountain is a lot of the newer areas. That's where a lot of the newer areas are. So there's newer subdivisions, but they still have bungalows and properties where you have development potential, where you can add a second suite. There's some properties there with detached garages as well, but a lot of properties there are newer, so you end up paying a premium for them. So if you're just looking from a strictly rental perspective and you're not going to be living there yourself, you might notice there's a price difference because you're paying for a newer house, but the rental potential is the same, and you're going to have to do a reno anyways a lot of times. Just because these houses are built, let's say like 20 years ago, doesn't mean they're up to date. They're still out of style. So a lot of times, even if you're buying a house that was built in like 1990 or 2000, you still got to do rentals, because generally speaking, a lot of homeowners, they haven't done rentals in the last 5 years. When you're buying like these type of properties, you have to keep that in mind, right? Like if you're buying, let's say, something in the South Mountain for $750 or $800K, and you can get something similar for, let's say, $675 in a different part of the mountain, and both of them require the same amount of rentals and they will generate the same amount of rental income, it doesn't make sense to go for the South Mountain. But if you're gonna move there, that's when it gets interesting, depending on where you're coming from, right? Like if you're coming from a suburb in the GTA, you're probably going to want to be in that type of a property where the area is a little newer. It reminds you of wherever you lived before. And that's the cool thing with the newer areas more south. A lot of like the shopping areas are there as well. A lot of the big box stores are there. Lime Ridge Mall is a little bit more south as well. So yeah, generally speaking, there isn't a huge price difference in these properties. Obviously, like things like square footage and unique features matter. Also, tenant profile isn't generally that different between more northern area or more south or west area, because locally everyone knows like once you go onto the mountain, it's a nicer area, so people are willing to go wherever rentals are available, because we do have a shortage. Just like the GTA, there's not enough housing supply. Generally speaking, like you'll get the same rents, you'll get the same tenant quality. I always recommend, like if you're gonna come to the city, if you don't live too far away, like you live within an hour drive, it's definitely worth coming down. Like a lot of my clients come down and they're not really familiar with the area, so they've seen maybe downtown or other parts of Hamilton when they're going through the QEW, maybe they're going to Niagara, but when they come onto the mountain, a lot of times they get shocked because it's like a completely different experience. They're going uphill, they're seeing the escarpment, it's a completely different view, so they get pleasantly surprised, I would say. So I would say it's definitely worth seeing it for yourself and maybe even driving around some of the areas. Yeah, if you have any questions, like feel free to reach out to me. I always try to reply, and you'll see a free guide below. It'll kind of go over some of the things to expect in the city generally, and I cover some other areas as well. I'll also be doing more videos covering different areas in the city, so not necessarily just one area. So yeah, feel free to reach out, and I'd be happy to help.